Hello, we are the Exploring Novel Machine Learning Techniques for Brain-Computer Interface (BCI) Applications group. A brain-computer interface, or BCI, is a device that records neural activity and translates it into executable commands. Such interfaces are particularly important for individuals with severe motor impairments, such as ALS, because they can restore a reliable channel of communication when voluntary movement is no longer possible. In this study, we employ EEGs, a non-invasive technique that acquires potentials through surface electrodes and is both safe and cost-effective, in contrast to invasive techniques that require surgery, which means that they include more risk and are more expensive. The specific BCI examined here is a P300 speller. The P300 speller presents the user with a matrix of characters and symbols. The typical format is a 6 by 6 grid or a 9 by 8 grid, depending on the specific device. Groups of characters are illuminated in a pseudo-random sequence at a fixed interstimulus interval. When the row or column containing the user's target character flashes, the brain generates a positive deflection in the EEG approximately 300 milliseconds post-stimulus, which is the P300 event-related potential. The system aligns the EEG trace with each flash, identifies those flashes that evoke the P300 signature, and labels them as target. By combining two or more target flashes that share a single character, the P300 speller determines the intended character, enabling continuous letter selection and real-time text generation.
Standard P300 speller systems need extensive subject-specific calibration, a process that is both time-consuming and physically taxing, particularly for ALS participants who fatigue quickly. Our objective is to shorten this setup period by leveraging previously collected EEG data from other users to initialize the model for a new participant. This strategy, however, must confront three main challenges. First, EEG signals exhibit high inter-individual variability, so patterns learned from one user may not generalize to another. Second, Duke's big P3 BCI dataset and BCI datasets more broadly is heavily imbalanced, containing far fewer ALS than non-ALS recordings, which leaves us with a lack of representative data for the target ALS population. Third, non-ALS and ALS datasets were acquired under different neural conditions and interstimulus intervals, producing a domain shift that can impede transfer learning performance. Addressing these limitations is the motivation for the research done this summer. Here's the training data distributions for the big P3 BCI dataset. Everything is tested on individual participants from study L. So study specific is trained on training data from specific study L subjects, which is ALS data. Within domain is trained on data from study B, which is ALS patients as well. Cross domain is trained on data from five studies, studies A, C, H, K, and M, which are non-ALS participants. Cross-domain small data set is trained on the data from two studies, studies A and C, which are non-ALS participants. All subject-specific and within-domain data have an interstimulus interval of 250 milliseconds, while cross-domain configurations could have 125 milliseconds or 250 milliseconds.
This diagram provides a high-level overview of the workflow applied to every recording. First, data loading, where raw EEG and stimulus markers are imported using scikit-learn and TensorFlow utilities. Then pre-processing, we lined up recordings that use different timing by undersampling the 250 millisecond sessions to match 125 milliseconds. Filter out the noise with a 0.5 to 30 Hz bandpass and 60 Hz notch filter, and downsample from 256 Hz to 20 Hz. So files needs lower computational cost without losing the P300 spike. The clean epochs process to model selection, where we compare two classifiers, stepwise linear discriminant analysis, a straightforward linear model as a baseline, and EEG-net, a compact convolutional neural network that learns spatiotemporal features. Finally, speller selection turns the model probabilities into letters, stopping the flashes after a set of number flashes.
So let's talk about the results. So in these graphs, you can see the character accuracy, or the percentage of characters that our model actually predicted to be correct, on the y-axis. And you can see our individual participants along the x-axis, with the average being the last column. We're comparing those different configurations that we showed you before in that training data graph. And you can see that the key things to notice here actually come in the quality and the quantity of our training data, and that's what really informs the outcome for our SWILDA results. So you can see that our gold standard or best method has the highest quality. That's our subject specific, or the gold crosses. Those ones are the best because it's trained on actual data from the participant themselves, so it has the best quality of data. The rest of the methods for SWLDA produced pretty similar results, but you can see that within domain performed a little bit better for the high-performing participants, such as participant 3 or 5, whereas the cross-domain performed better for some of the lower-performing participants, such as 6 or 10. But things get a little bit more interesting when we look at our EEG-NET results. So using EEG-NET, we can see a much bigger distinction between subject-specific still being our gold standard best, and then next, on our averages, we can see that within domain performs the best, because that has the best quality of data since it's trained on other ALS participants and then applied to ALS participants again. We can see a difference in the quantity of data when we compare our cross-domain large dataset and our small dataset. As you can see, the large dataset does better in almost every case, except for some outliers in the middle of our data with participants 2, 11, and 1. We can also compare the quantity when we look at the different interstimulus intervals, or the ISI. So if you look at the circles versus the triangles, the circles are for ISI 125, which is more data, and the triangles are 250, which is less data. But you can see that they actually perform pretty similarly. So although we cut the quantity of data in half, we still maintain some of that quality, and still had similar results.
Here are some further directions for this project. First, test how spatial filtering changes model performance, starting with classical bandpass and common average filters. Then compare them to more sophisticated approaches. The X-down spatial filter can be applied in both within domain and across domain training. This should amplify the B300 components to demonstrate whether the extra signal to noise boost help or hurt generalization across subjects and datasets. Because training data hinges on what we feed the model, we will select data more intelligently using k-nearest neighbor search on embedded features to pick tries that best represents each domain and cut redundant or noise example. We also like to look into adapting data style directly with the style GAN-based augmentation. We can adapt source recordings to mimic target domain statistics.
These are our references. Thank you.